Hey, it's Chris, and this is PMFM.
That face paint came courtesy of Lucian, who is currently working on an art project that involves a bunch of people's faces. I'm very excited to see where that goes. But that's not what I want to talk about today, obviously. What I want to talk about is what you're looking at right now, which is DEFY Wrestling. I started recording DEFY again. I went to the show not thinking that I was going to record, but when I found out that there was going to be some guest wrestlers, I realized that I was going to have to. I didn't really have a choice. And the reason I didn't have a choice is because those guest wrestlers were the Lucha Brothers. And the reason I was so excited about them was really twofold. First of all, the Lucha Brothers wrestled for a promotion called Lucha Underground, which I watched a good chunk of the first season of and then stopped watching, and I feel really bad that I stopped watching them because they are really tailor-made towards my wrestling interests. And Pentagon Ohm, who is one of the Lucha Brothers, wrestled there as Pentagon Jr. and then transitioned into Pentagon Dark. And he had a bit of a rivalry with his real-life brother, but according to the show, not his brother, a wrestler named Phoenix. But in other promotions, they wrestle as a tag team, and they are an incredible tag team. And that sort of brings me to the second reason I was so excited to see them, which is that they had already planned to wrestle with DEFY once before. And I can't remember if it was either my first or second show that I went to for DEFY. They were scheduled to appear, and then the day before they had to cancel. And the story goes that Penta El Om was robbed at gunpoint and had his bag stolen from him, including merchandise, but also his own ring gear, meaning that he could not wrestle the next day at DEFY Wrestling. And there's some controversy about that. Some people don't believe his story. I guess he's canceled a few other promotions before, and some people think he just came up with a really good excuse. But that's sort of beside the point. The fact is he didn't show up and his brother didn't show up, so I didn't get to see them, and that was definitely a bummer, but the rest of the show was good enough that I couldn't be too mad. But it was so cool to see them finally, and they are incredible tag team wrestlers. What I loved most about watching them was that they both didn't stop doing things. Tag teams usually will have one person featured at a time, and the other person's just kind of doing some background stuff that they know you're going to ignore because you really can only focus on one thing at a time, obviously. But these two don't do that so much. They realize that they're wrestling in a fairly small area, and so as long as they're not trying to do something simultaneously, they can probably both do cool things constantly, and you'll be able to go from watching one to watching the other. And it was so cool to watch them wrestle because there was constantly stuff happening. There was one guy fighting in one area and another guy fighting in another area. It was just really cool to watch. But I don't want to spend this whole video talking about just them. I want to mention some of the other wrestlers as well. Because one of the really cool things that's been happening with DEFY is that over time, they've started to get some regulars. So Swerve, Shane Strickland, has been a regular since the beginning. He basically is DEFY. He's, I think, their second champion, but he's been a champion for most of the shows I've been to. Honestly, he's amazing. He's really, really good. I kind of want him to lose the championship just so I can watch him get it back. But there's a couple other wrestlers who have become regulars as well. One of them is the ravenous Randy Myers, who is an incredible character and really fun to watch. And the other is probably my favorite wrestler with DEFY, a man named Brody King. And I love Brody King because he's just a big bruiser who just wants to hurt people, and I would have loved to see him defeat Swerve for that championship. They've wrestled once already. Honestly, at that point, I wanted Brody to win, but it's been really cool to see these three wrestlers over and over again and really get to have an attachment to them. And just get to know their characters a lot better, because so many people just come to Defy and then never come back, and so you get to watch them and enjoy them, but then you don't get to see them again, and so you don't get to build an attachment to the character. And so it's been really great. The last 3 wrestling matches of the night were Brody King, Randy Meyer, and then Swerve wrestling against their opponents. It was really fun to watch that. Really cool to get to, again, build an attachment to Defy Wrestling through these regular wrestlers. And speaking of, the Lucha Brothers wrestled another group of regulars who call themselves the American Guns, who are an awesome bunch of Tacoma-based, short Hispanic wrestlers who wrestle as a tag team, and they're a little bit undersized, but they make up for that by cheating and just being real mean, and I really like them as well. The last thing I want to mention is that this was the first Defy show I went to sort of alone, but it was also the first Defy show I got to go to with 2 different people. So both John and Caven were there watching this Defy show, but none of us sat together. But I did get to drive up with Caven, and so we got to talk while going up and coming down as well. And this is where I should probably mention that Caven and Lauren have started dating. They were friends for a bit. Lauren really wanted to date Caven, and then finally found out that Caven wanted to date her too. And I have to say, the fact that their relationship blossomed somewhat slowly was really great for me, because Caven's the first person that Lauren has dated who I got to know and become friends with before they were officially dating. And that meant that I didn't have to have that in the back of my head that this is someone Lauren's dating when I first met him. I just got to meet him without any real bias. And it's so nice to be friends with someone that Lauren's dating and not just think, oh, this is someone who I will kind of have to be around. And I don't mind them, but I wouldn't be friends with them on my own. I would be friends with Caven without Lauren there, and I mean, this was sort of proof. We got to drive all the way up to Seattle and drive all the way back, and it was great. It's just really nice to actually not just be okay with the fact that Lauren's dating somebody, but actually be friends with that person for really the first time for either one of us, because Lauren's never been very good friends with anyone that I've dated either. So yeah, Defy is awesome. It's worth the trip every time. I always sort of dread the drive, but when I'm there and on the way back, I'm so glad that I went. Future me, are there any new regulars to Defy Wrestling? Anybody you're really getting to know?